Among the phrases with which our Lord wanted to prepare his apostles for the scandal of the cross, there is one that his apostles and disciples must have heard, because it was very well known. It referred to a passage of that march of Israel throughout Sinai on the way to the Promised Land. They were crossing an area full of snakes, which were not only a biblical symbol in Genesis of the devil, but also not a symbol in that case, but a reality because they bit and were poisonous. Many Israelites were victims of them, and so Moses asked the Lord to help the people once again. The Lord commanded him to make a bronze serpent, to put it on a pole on a staff, to lift it up, and he promised that everyone who looked at the bronze serpent would be cured of the bite of the real serpents. That was one of the miracles with which the Lord protected his people on the way to the Promised Land. That is why when the Lord uses that phrase, St. John recalls it. When I am lifted up on high, lifted up above the earth, I will draw all men to me. The apostles knew well, or should have known well, what it meant and what Jesus Christ meant. He was talking about his cross. Perhaps they did not understand it at the time, but no doubt they understood it later. The evangelist, John himself, tells it later. They understood it later when after death, the resurrection took place and they had the opportunity to see, hear, and touch that glorious body, that resurrected body. We are today on Passion Friday, the Friday of Sorrows, just a week away from Good Friday, and it is therefore very useful for us to remember that the moment when Christ was lifted up on high, the moment when he was crucified, it is right that we look at him there in painful solitude of the wood, to let us ourselves be attracted by him, an attraction that has always worked for those who have a heart that is not yet completely petrified by selfishness, and above all, by pride. If we begin Lent remembering the words of the Apostle Thomas, we too will die with him, pronounced when Jesus, learning of the mortal illness of Lazarus, has decided to return to the vicinity of Jerusalem as was Bethany, and the apostles had told him that they were looking for him to kill him, and he said, "We still have to go." And Thomas, in the name of all, said, "We will accompany you," and told the others, "We will die with him." If we have begun Lent with this desire to accompany Jesus to his cross, ready to die with him in order to live with him, we are now going to do it more than ever, attracted by him, attracted by this terrible and at the same time beautiful spectacle of Christ, true God and true man who dies crucified to save us. But this death that we are willing to share with Christ out of gratitude and love for him is not the physical one, except in the case of those who still continue to give their lives for Christ, as is in the case, for example, of Christians who died at the hands of Muslims in various African countries. The death that the Lord asks us to accept, even to seek, is that of renouncing our vices, our selfishness, and above all, our pride. To die with him, attracted by him, voluntarily subjugated by the spectacle of the crucified Christ, means to renounce these points that characterize our pride. The first is the pride of sight, avoiding, for example, pornography, which is the one of the great plagues of our time. The pride of sight, you cannot see everything. Everything has consequences. The second pride is the pride of the flesh, trying to live chastely, to live the virtue of chastity within the vocation to which each one has been called by the Lord, because it is not the same how a married person, for example, has to live chastity compared to a priest. The third pride is the renounced security, accepting the mystery of not knowing what will become of us tomorrow, accepting to put ourselves in God's hands without being sure if we will have firm ground to put our feet on the following day. That although it may not seem so, it is also an act of pride, and we have to learn to walk on the waters trusting in God's mercy. The next pride is that of understanding. The pride of understanding tells us that we have to understand everything, that we have to know the why of everything. When one accepts that God is God and we are not gods, then we accept that the Lord knows what he does, even though we do not often understand why he does it. The next pride consists in renouncing to control others, renouncing to be the center, or even renouncing to control our own life, accepting that God is God, that we are not, that we cannot pretend that others revolve around us as if we were the sun, and they, even God himself, were the planets that revolve around us. To renounce control, to learn to listen, to learn that we have a lot to learn, even if sometimes we think we already know it all. The next pride is also something important, very important, especially in certain moments of life, is to accept that we have limitations. Because we are human beings, we age, we get sick, and sometimes diseases that may seem absurd, that may apparently illogical and unjustified, that makes no sense, or that are long-lasting, painful, very frustrating, limiting, are part of human nature. The pride of not only wanting to control everything, but being like God, who does not age, who does not get sick, who does not have economic problems, is a pride that we have to fight against. The last part of pride, the pride of relativism, which consists in wanting to decide for ourselves what is good and what is bad. I believe this is the great plague of our time, as Benedict XVI clearly said, which also becomes a dictatorship of relativism. Pride, which is one of our sins, the original sin and the origin of sin of Adam and Eve. Not only the sin of disobedience to God, but the sin of eating the fruit of the forbidden tree, the fruit of the knowledge of tree of good and evil, the fruit that allowed you to decide that what is good suits you and what is bad is what does not interest you. The pride of relativism is leading us to destruction as persons and as humanity, as people. That is why the fight against pride consists in accepting what God teaches us through the natural law. There are things that are evident that are bad and others that are evident that are good, and they are written in our DNA, in the conscience of all men. And then there is the revelation of when natural law is clouded by human selfishness, is still a voice that awakens our conscience, revelation in the word, revelation through tradition, a revelation that prevents us from bribing ourselves and or allowing ourselves to be bribed. Let us go to Jerusalem to die with him. And let us go to Jerusalem to die with him, attracted by him. When he is lifted up on high, he said it, I will draw all men to me. And we experience it that way. We, who have a heart of stone, however, perhaps there still remains within us something of a heart of flesh, a heart capable of feeling love. A heart capable of letting itself be loved by the Lord, attracted by that terrible and beautiful image of the crucified Christ, which is going to break the capsule of stone that envelops and suffocates it. The same thing that Quevedo said in that famous poem Sonnet. We humbly say to the Lord, I am dust, Lord, I am dust. I am a sinner, I am dust. Quevedo spoke of this death, when he was going to die, when the moment of his death came, in love as he was with a woman, and he said to her, dust, I will be more dust in love. We say that to crucified Christ, to that Christ that we are contemplating and that attracts us to him, which breaks the armor of our heart of stone. We say, Lord, I know that I am dust, but I am dust in love. Let us go to Jerusalem in this week that we have left, until the week in which we will see Christ crucified on Good Friday. Let us go to Jerusalem to die with him, to die for him, attracted by him, because we know very well if we die with him, we will reign with him. If we're able to let him save us, that our heart beats of love for him, of feeling love for him, and of good works, of those good works that begin to be the works that arise as a fight against pride. If we die with him, if our hearts beats for him, we will triumph with him. We will reign with him. May you have a joyful Holy Week. See you next week, God willing.